Welcome everyone to the fifth episode of The Lockdown, featuring our guest, Joel Darling, executive producer for Sportsnet and special events at the NHL. Joel, how's it going?
Hey guys, I'm doing well. How are you all doing?
It's going good.
Not bad.
All right, Joel. So obviously, you've been producing for a while now. You've been in trucks. You obviously produce Hockey Night in Canada, which is one of the coolest shows that has been going on forever. And now, obviously, hockey is taking a pause, and you're at home. So how has that been going for you?
Well, I think it's been going okay. I think probably like everybody, the new normal is a little bit different for all of us and in all our lives. And sometimes the days go fast, sometimes they go slow. Even today, I was thinking around 3:00 and thinking, oh my God, this day's taking forever. But it's been going okay. We've been doing some things with Sportsnet, learning lots of new things and new ways to do things, and still learning every day. But I find pretty busy with some of the content that we're trying to produce.
Joel, I'm curious as to what that day was on March 11th when everything kind of took a turn in terms of the NHL. All the sports leagues kind of deciding whether they're going to cancel or not. I'm wondering what it was like from your position in your role, kind of managing that.
Yeah, well, in my role, we were in the process of trying to get ready for the announcement of the top four Kraft Hockeyville finalists. So we were going to do that on that Saturday coming up. And then when everything kind of went south, we realized that we weren't going to have hockey. So what else was going to happen? So there was a bunch of things that happened, I think, internally at Sportsnet. A lot of people came up with some different ideas. I had pushed an idea, which you will see now, I guess, on online right now. And it's actually on Sportsnet on the weekend, is a show called In Conversation with Ron MacLean. So I'd pitched that show, and we were actually getting ready to try to produce it for that first Monday after hockey and basketball and everything was canceled. So our plan was we kind of spent Friday and Saturday getting it ready, getting the studio ready. We had guests lined up for that first Monday night, and then as of Sunday, we were told we just can't do it. We can't bring people into the studio. We can't put them on a couch next to each other. And so it all went down really quickly. So it shifted from, trying to do it inside a studio to suddenly now, how do we do it with Ron MacLean sitting at his home in Oakville and me at my home, and how do we figure out a way to do that? So that was the next stage, and I think it took us about a week and a half to get ready, but technically, we had to figure out how to do it because we really hadn't done it this way before.
That's pretty awesome. That's one thing that we see on Sportsnet's Instagram for sure. The most is the In Conversation with Ron MacLean, and obviously I saw yesterday that Gary Bettman was a special guest. So how is it working to get guests especially like Gary Bettman, one of the busiest men right now for sure? How is the situation going with that?
It's been good. I think we have found that I mean, the one thing, everybody is at home. They aren't doing a lot. So, you've got a captive audience of guests. So from that standpoint, I think it's better than it normally has, just because, people are at home. And at times we say, well, why don't we do it at 1:00? And I say, well, I don't know if they can do it. Well, what else are people doing? So, we found it's pretty easy to find guests. The idea was to do different people, not just hockey people. So, we've had Gretzky and Haley Wickenheiser were on the first show. We had Mark McMorris, a snowboarder, last night. I'm really looking forward to Mr. Bettman tomorrow. And then on Friday, we have Adam Hadwin, Mike Weir, and Laurie Kane. So as the weather starts to turn nice, I'm really interested in hearing, their perspective on whether or not people can golf. So from a guest perspective, it's been pretty good. I think, again, we're trying to hit on different sports, different walks of life, and just trying to find out different ways people are experiencing what's happening.
Yeah, and clearly there's tons of, especially now with sports kind of on hold, there's tons of new content that's being pumped out every day. But the question that everyone seems to be asking is when is everything going to go back to normal, especially when our sport's going to go back? So in your opinion, do you see the NHL season specifically being played out? Do you see it just being like the season being over? Do you see them starting playoffs right off the bat?
Well, I think we've all heard different rumors of what may or may not happen. I think I guess what I've always thought along the way here is that if they do bring sport back, which I think people want, it will be healthy for people's minds. But I think if it does come back, it'll come back for a good reason. And one of the good reasons will be is it will give some people work. I mean, as we all know right now, there's lots of people who are not working. So not just for the hockey player, but for the person who sells the program or the parking lot attendant or the usher or just the people that work for the team. So I do think they will do everything they can to have some sort of a season or playoffs to wrap up this year. The other thing which I don't think people realize or think about is if you were, just as an example, if you were to start the season in, let's say the playoff season in July with 16 teams, in 2 weeks you're down to 8 teams. In 4 weeks you're down to 4 teams. And in another 2 weeks you're down to 2 teams. So it doesn't mean you're going to have 30 teams playing in July and August. So yes, the teams that go to the finals, the team that wins the final, they could play into August. But yes, bring everybody back maybe a little bit later. Maybe it's November, so there might be a month off in there. But I don't think you'll find any complaints from players for that. But there's a lot of parts that go into that for sure to try to figure it out. But I think from just the player's perspective, it takes the season late, but some of those teams are out of the playoffs pretty quickly. You could have a team again in early July, they're on a break.
Yeah, and you hear guys like Max Pacioretty saying that he'd be willing to go to Antarctica if he meant finishing the season. A big conversation that's being had is, well, we can come back and play hockey, but there's not going to be any fans in the stands. I'm wondering, because it's such a big part of the atmosphere and playing, if you've thought of potentially or anyone's thought of any ideas to kind of, there's no way to necessarily replace that, but to kind of get that feeling into the broadcast in some way, so it's not just dead air.
Yeah, I do think in some ways it would be really novel, really different. First of all, if it's playoff hockey, it's going to be intense. It will be odd, to not have fans in the stands and that sound and that excitement. But I do think it's the playoffs. There's a lot on the line. I think there still will be a lot of excitement around that. And players, again, in the end, because of what we've all gone through, the situation, I don't think that really will matter. I have had some interesting discussions, and different people have, in fact, I had somebody reach out the other day, is that, for the television audience, there may be a way to virtually put a crowd in the building. So you could do that. But I haven't thought about this, but the idea of adding international sound, fake international sound, wouldn't be the way to go. You could still pick up the sound off the ice, but I think it'd be really different. And I think, although it may sound really odd to watch a game that way, I think it might in some ways make it even more interesting.
As a producer, now that you've been doing a lot of stuff virtually and that you actually don't have to physically be in a room with, let's say, Ron MacLean, who's on air, and the directors and whatnot, do you think that that's going to alter the way the industry is in terms of like trucks and doing everything remote?
It could. I mean, I guess to some degree we've all been able to come up with different ways to provide different content. The art of producing a hockey game where there's 40 or 50 people, this is not going to replace that. I mean, in the case of what we're doing with Ron, it's a producer / technician who's in his basement with a Wirecast system, who's bringing the feeds in and editing it and turning it around for later in the evening. We are taping it, as opposed to 40 or 50 people inside a stadium, with cameramen and things like that. So it's not going to replace that live sport element, whether it be hockey or golf or any sport. There's still, that traditional way that, the game needs to be shot. Now, having said that, we have done different ways of shooting hockey games that we haven't done in the past, not on the NHL level, but some of the junior games that we've been doing what we call Remy style, which are basically remote from Sportsnet, where the producer and the director are in Toronto, The commentators are in Toronto calling the game off tube, and what's coming back are just camera feeds. So, to some degree, we are doing that in some ways. It's just not certainly at this level or at a pace, based on, what COVID-19 has brought to the world.
And to piggyback off of that, something that's always stuck with me is watching the documentary that followed you and the Hockey Night team around for a season. And what really struck me in that was that how you guys all traveled together and were together the whole season as a team. I'm wondering if you, in your role, have seen a shift in terms of how people interact with each other and the kind of the broadcast environment, since people have becoming, remote has becoming more normal and there's freelancers that are in-house rather than traveling around with the team. I'm wondering if you've seen a change at all in the broadcast.
Well, I think I think that documentary was maybe made about 10 years ago. Is that the one you're talking about? A circus?
Yeah, the one. Yeah.
Circuses in town or something? Yeah. Things have changed from then, but still, even today, there's still a small, maybe the group is smaller that travels game to game, because there's still people that we want to have familiar with our shows that go from game to game to game. So maybe the size of the group has gotten smaller, but I think that camaraderie, that teamwork, that team building, that traveling together really hasn't changed much. Now, obviously, with what's happened, that may change things as well. There's things that we haven't even thought about yet. Probably is the fact that people can't even fly to the States now. I think there's no flights available to the States till late May, right? So, there's restrictions about the border and things like that are going to continue to come up that we haven't thought about. But for the most part, things really haven't changed that much between, what that documentary said 10 or 15 years ago as what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the hockey world and the hockey culture, we've seen that over time. You have players like PK Subban, and now you got Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews, who are a bit more flashy, and they're not afraid to be in commercials and take their iPhone out and just start a live stream. Do you think that this is the time where the NHL should refocus its concentration, let's say, and expand their horizon of having these players go live and interact with fans and be more active on social media, since we don't really see that usually?
Yeah, I think you will see more of it, but I think, the other thing about hockey players, I think they are genuinely, known as one of the, of all the major sports guys, that are probably the nicest guys, maybe the most accessible, things like that. I would like to think that through this, everybody's learned to do things differently. So, when you see Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews and Justin Bieber doing something online, it's something they've learned or they've picked up because they've had some downtime and they've been able to fiddle around with this medium, right? So I think just like everybody, they're learning different things that they can do. And you know what? Some players really want to make their brand really special. And, whether it's Mitch Marner putting out a letter to kids, or I guess he learned how to dance the yummy from what I heard, that's on his phone. But I mean, they're learning to do things differently, and there's a lot of messages out there and a lot of content. So I think it will change, but I also think they have the time now. When you see them get back into a season, and they're going to lock themselves down, and there'll probably be restrictions with regards to the team, and they won't have their phone in their hands 24 hours a day. But they certainly will be able to do some more things. But I think, again, when competition gets back, that'll be the main focus. And you sometimes, I think, as these players, you don't want to be found doing something that's maybe silly during the season that you might be doing now, just to maybe make cheer up some kids or do something that's just a little bit more fun. It'll be more business, obviously, when the season comes back.
There's so much content on digital and social media right now. I wonder if you see any of that, truly carrying over and having a stand on its own when this is all over. I know that you produce ice surfing on Twitter. I wonder if you see more kind of live broadcast formats being put on digital and social media, and also like watch parties and stuff like that.
I think there will be. I mean, I think maybe in the end, after all this is over and we get back to business, people maybe just, will take the best of what really worked. And what that is, I'm not necessarily sure, but yes, now, you know, um, we could do this 4 box and watch a hockey game together. I'm trying to figure out how I can have a poker game with friends, with a digital online poker game, with a computer screen next to it opened up with guys to play, right? So yeah, watch parties, of course, there's things to do. So we certainly have learned a lot. I mean, I just today, we tape with Ron on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and today we actually did a test with this whole system again to see what was working and what wasn't working. So for us, we're learning things new every day on the technology side and what we can and can't do. We're in the process of doing a show with Wayne Gretzky that's going to air this weekend. We taped it last week with Ron, and now we're basically, what they do is they dissect the game. There's 2 shows they're doing. So they dissected the '93 Stanley Cup final between LA and Montreal. So Wayne was at home, Ron was at home. We recorded them, and basically we did a cut down of the game that they talk over in an hour show. So, we're figuring out how we can do that. We've never really done that before, where an editor is sitting at home, the producer is sitting at home. You can't be sitting over his shoulder kind of editing the program. So I do think, after all this is over, the good things on the communication side through the web that people enjoy will stick around, and people find ways to entertain themselves as their friends, or publicly allowing people to socially jump in and enjoy communicating in a different way.
For sure. And none of us are actually graduating this year, but it is a weird time to be graduating, especially for our peers in upper years. I'm wondering if you would be able to, if you have any advice for people who are, stepping into an industry in a weird time, where they should be focusing their energy and their talents if they want to be in live sports, particularly.
Well, I mean, I think even from my standpoint, and I think, you guys, when you entered Ryerson, you enter thinking, maybe I want to do this job, and then you found out, God, there's all these other jobs out there that I never knew about, whether it's producing or directing or on the technical side. And I'll use an example. There's a gentleman who I hadn't met until we started doing this with Ron on his show, who is basically producing the show from his basement. So he's using a Wirecast system. It's called Wirecast. And we've actually, the first couple episodes, we just used Wirecast, and then we actually used a combination of Wirecast and Zoom. What he's actually doing is he's producing a 30-minute show 3 times a week in his basement, where, we do the interviews, we send him B-roll, we send him pictures, we send him graphic boards and promotion, and he turns around and produces that. I didn't even really know that job existed. I'm not even sure that was a job, so to speak, up until this whole thing happened. So I think first of all, I always say that this is a great business to be in. I know it's changing. Sometimes you will hear people say that, there's too many people in the business and there's not enough jobs, but I do truly think that the people who are good in this, who are creative, who have drive and really have a focus on what they want to do, will find jobs. This isn't the greatest time. I have a 24-year-old at home who was working on hometown hockey, and he's at home now, trying to figure out what his next step is. So it's not like he can even go online and apply for a job right now. So it is tough times, but hopefully this will turn around quickly, and the need for people, the need for jobs and different ways to do things will happen. But it's, we got to get out of this first and get people back out of their houses.
What is the thing that you miss the most about, like, let's say, going to work or live sports?
I probably miss the most are the people, the people you work with, just like you, and classmates and things like that. I think, I miss just being in my office and talking to people, or, not being afraid to get next to somebody, right? I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have been out here and there, whether it's walking down the street or at the grocery store. You know, you got to be on alert, and you got to step to the side, or you got to make sure you're not going that way. So that's probably what I miss the most, not having to worry about what's 6 feet around me. That's the toughest part. Yes, I miss sports. I miss that I can't go out and play golf as the weather starts to turn nice. But that whole kind of change in attitude where, you know, you're looking over your shoulder and you just can't function the way you used to. That's the strangest part of all of this.
And to kind of piggyback off that, so that's kind of what you miss the most about work, but what is the first thing that you're going to do as soon as everything gets back to normal?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd like to think the first thing, well, I'm really looking forward to golfing. I'd love to get out and golf, and I do hope that maybe that does come back. Probably just going to a restaurant and having dinner, you know, with family or friends. We've had, you know, everybody's got some close friends, and even to sit and have a drink with, you know, 2 or 3 feet away is interesting. Early on, we did a driveway party where people were 8 feet apart, which just feels odd, but and we've done, you know, charcuterie parties on Zoom, and we've done birthday parties on Zoom, and just being able to be in the same room with a bunch of people and not having to worry about being close to them. So yeah, I think going out to dinner with a bunch of people would be a lot of fun.
What style of restaurant will that be?
Something spicy, maybe Italian.
There you go.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. I'm Italian. I'll give you every restaurant in Toronto if you want.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's about it, Joel. Thank you for taking the time, and we appreciate your company here today on our Zoom chat.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me, and good luck, and hope to see us all out there soon.
Yeah. All the best, Joel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.